Firstly, welcome to Beyond the Title, as part of this fantastic celebration of the world of radio. Maybe we could start by finding out about your relationship with radio growing up, and did you have any radio heroes?
Gosh, yes, I did. So I was really lucky. I discovered radio really young. We lived in Oxford, and my mum had a friend who was a producer at BBC Radio Oxford, and she worked with a man called Timmy Mallet, who you might know. Yeah. So, and Timmy had a weekend show that he used to get kids in on. And like the most creative radio person, totally part of that, that sort of late 70s, early 80s, really creative bunch of radio broadcasters, lots of characters, lots of drama, lots of writing. And he had a children's radio series, which doesn't translate very well in 2023, called Prince Timmy and the Golden Tranny. Which was a reference to transistor radios, and not our dear and loved trans community. Yeah, exactly. And she got me in, and I was 8, and I ended up playing a character called Susan Zink. And Prince Timmy was the hero. He was the superhero, but he was a bit crap. So he needed a female sidekick, and I was the female sidekick. So we did this radio drama, and it ended up on the BBC World Service, I think. But we did competitions, and we had giveaways, and oh my God, my mum and dad, poor bless them. But I used to announce things on the radio, like tomorrow we'd be having a Blue Peter bring and buy sale. And they would have no knowledge of it at all, Josh. And like then they'd have to get together like stalls and competitions and jars of sweets, and we had count the number of spots on the Dalmatian and all sorts of stuff. So I had radio in my life from day one, and I always loved being in that live environment. I loved being in a live studio.
This next question kind of very much links into what you just said. So one of the striking things about your early career is that your first experience with radio was at the age of 7 as part of a drama on BBC Radio Oxford with Timmy Mallet, before going on to front a daily children's show alongside him. Nowadays, Mallet is mostly remembered for Whackaday, but what were the differences between his radio and television persona? Away from the zaniness of his act, what was he like as a normal radio presenter?
I mean, it was a long time ago. I know it's hard to believe. But he and I'm still friends with him, so we keep in touch, and he was something of a mentor to me as well going through my radio career. He was really encouraging. He was really structured. So he would always make you think about the links. What do we want out of this link? Let's find the funny. What's the funny about this? What's the, like always looking for the funny, always looking for the joke. A very busy man, always 1,000 ideas, ranging from script ideas and writing through to production. And, he was using sound effects and all sorts of stuff that was really sort of ahead of its time, actually. And if you look at the likes of Kenny Everett, who was one of my radio heroes, all of that was just starting to happen. So all these people were having so much fun because they were like discovering how you make a fart sound, or how do you get the sound of like a running group of cats and dogs and door slamming. So there was a lot of fun, and his brain was just always super, super busy and at like 100 miles an hour the whole time. But he was really lovely to me, and let us go. He was very brave. He was a brave person on the radio. He just, let it happen. And that's gorgeous. That's a really nice thing to learn from.
Yeah. Josh only remembers him from Whackaday.
Yeah. bang on the head like this, to bang on the head like this. Don't repeat a word, say a word. Yeah, exactly. He's still got as well. He's still got those hammers. It's the word association game. Mustn't pause, mustn't hesitate. Say a word or repeat a head. Otherwise, you get a bash on the head like this or a bash on the head like this. Look at each other.
Good. Joining Radio 1 in April 1998, towards the end of Matthew Bannister's tenure as controller, how significant was he in regaining the demographic of 18 to 25-year-olds? And how pivotal was the culture of the late 90s in reinforcing the generational shift which the station had been craving?
Well, there was these, I mean, I have for the large part of my career been sort of blissfully ignorant of a lot of the politics, but I was very aware that there were big changes after Matthew. There was a night of the long knives and all the sackings of the great big legends. And I think, to a degree, it's still a current pressure, very much so, that we see every day now, that the BBC has to be accountable to fee payers, has to be accountable to government, has to be accountable, and has to continue and strive always to represent its audience correctly and well. And we see that even today, in the past few weeks, the interesting conversations that have been going on. But I think there was, when I joined, there was a huge wave of energy in that building, and I was very aware of the culture beforehand. But for me, when I joined, so we had Sarah Cox and Trevor Nelson and lots of young people, and Moyles came along. So it felt very exciting. It was a very exciting time to be there, because there was clearly motivation, and there was clearly a need to change things. So it was a really interesting and fun time to be there, for sure.
The 90s was a culturally defining decade for music, with the birth of Britpop, soft rock, and this unwavering positivity which swept the nation. In your opinion, how did the socioeconomic structure of the 90s inspire a new generation of talent to make music?
Oh my God, Josh, you're killing me, babe. What are we doing? Jesus. Well, it's really funny because, I worked at Creation Records with Oasis and Ride and all those people. I think there was, and actually it's really funny because me and my husband were talking about this the other night, in that you're sort of post Thatcherism, and post a difficult economic time, and so a lot of the Britpop movement was a bit screw you, wasn't it? It was angry and it was defiant and it was youth based, and it was like, why are you old people making shit decisions for us who are about to kind of embrace the world as our own. And so when you've got the likes of everybody from Blur to Oasis to Teenage Fan Club to all of those people, they were number one, anthemic and positive chants that we could all sing along to, but they were also highly political. They were, it was very political, and I'm quite surprised that actually music hasn't responded in the same way at the moment. It has in certain areas, certainly it has in certain areas, but not across the board. And we were talking, and I think that at that time Britpop was, you felt as a 20-something person in the 90s that you owned the gaff. You know what I mean? It felt like you were driving that. It felt like this was our chance. This is our turn. And it needed to be done. There was a lot of that music was venting. A lot of that music was whether that was poll tax riots or whether that was everything, all that going on. It was a very hopeful, positive, but angry time.
So when he was more so Yeah, yeah. So, mine. Yeah.
I missed a little bit of that, Josh. So when you were at creation, what sort of responsibility were you?
Yeah.
To do with that legacy? What's so what? How are you connected to that legacy of creation?
I'm quite proud of my legacy actually at creation. Well, we had so I was working with Oasis from that second album, and so yeah, lots of things like from being involved in the photo shoot for that album cover, What's the Story, if you've seen the cover to Don't Look Back in Anger, yeah, it's got the drum kit with all those carnations. So I had to personally hand dye 200 blue carnations to get that, and then we set that up in Oxford Street in London in Virgin Records in the the front. And one of my first jobs that I had to do was we had to they played at Earl's Court, and me and my boss Emma G, which is why I'm Emma B, we had to hang these two giant posters of Noel and Liam at Earl's Court. But I also was one of the first people in that office to talk to Alan McGee about a website. And he was like, God, don't be ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. Nobody's on the bloody internet. You're mad. And we did start putting back catalogue stuff on the internet. And I see Alan quite a lot. And he still goes, you're the first person that ever talked to me about the internet. You're really proud of that. So it was an amazing time, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful to have been in the middle of that. And also, you know what, I was post all that drug frenzy that you read about. So like Alan was clean, and I walked into a much less scary creation. I don't know whether I'd have liked it before then, but yeah, so it wasn't quite as rock and roll, thank goodness.
Whilst at Radio 1, you presented the phone-in interactive show The Sunday Surgery alongside Dr. Mark Hamilton. In the age before mental health was realised as an important factor on the political and social agenda, how groundbreaking was this show in establishing a conversation about mental health?
It was completely groundbreaking. It just wasn't being done at all. Certainly not with young people. And it was a big risk for Radio 1 because Radio 1's a music station and Radio 1 doesn't do talk. And that's what we were doing. I think though, to be perfectly honest with you as well, it was probably a reaction to the 90s and club culture as well, because so much of Radio 1's programming at that time was dance music. So there was, that you had to be aware that you were encouraging young people to go into situations where there were drugs and alcohol. I think the BBC needed to sort of reflect that responsibility. So there was that side to it, but also I think there was a side to it where it was becoming very obvious that this was a trick that was being missed, because whether we were talking about self-harm or sex or racism, and at that time there were a lot of cultural tensions bubbling up as well, and we knew that our audience was a very mixed group of people, racially, age-wise, demographically, economically as well, and so it was a real opportunity to say hello to every one of our listeners. It was a real opportunity to say, let's talk about disability, let's talk about mental health, let's talk about race, let's talk about sex, with all the ridiculous questions about kissing and body parts in between all of that. But it was massively groundbreaking, and I'm extremely proud to have that on my CV.
Personally, this era at Radio 1 remains a special one for me. In what ways did yourself, Scott Mills, Chris Moyles, Joe Wiley, Mark and Lard help to reflect the fashions and fads of 90s Britain? Were there any bands or artists who you thought defined this era, and how significant were they in establishing the sounds of 90s Britain?
It was I mean, yeah, I'm going to be biased. I am going to be biased and say Oasis, and but then there were people like, you know, like the All Saints as well. If you know, I think sorry, that's my pug who is barking at thin air again. So I think, you know, for me it would have been Oasis on UK soil, who also really just embraced that cocky optimism of the 90s. Tony Blair's The Only Way Is Up, and New Labour, you know, this sort of up yours feeling that the tide was about to turn and things were going to get better, and you know, we had the world in our hands, and you know, those gigs at Main Road are legendary. They were incredible. The positivity, the, you know, the fact that you felt we were all coming together, you know, so much. It was really palpable. But I also think things like, you know, you take a group like the All Saints, who were, you know, born in the streets of Notting Hill and Carnival, and that was a real, you know, that was a mixed race pop group of girls that had attitude. And when, you know, when All Saints used to come in for interviews, if they were wearing their baseball caps, you were in trouble, because they would be monosyllabic. And, you know, you just like that, they got their baseball caps on, shit. But they were, so there was, I think there's that side of it. And then, of course, as well, for me, you know, you've got dance music, which exploded in the 90s. And so, you know, the likes of Pete Tong, Danny Rampling, all those great Big Ibiza, you know, legends that were opening up as well. So the 90s was an incredible time for music. It really was.
And looking at your Radio 1 tenure as a whole, what do you think it says about the interaction between the network and the audience?
This is like Newsnight. Josh, you're incredible. What do I think? Say that again. Let me think about that.
Looking at your Radio 1 tenure as a whole, what do you think it says about the interaction between the network and the audience?
I mean, I think because I was mainly on the Sunday Surgery at that time, but also we were doing I was also part of the live crew with the One Big Sundays and the road shows, and I think because of the remit that the BBC has, and the very fast pace of repositioning themselves to better represent the audience, I feel like there was a lot of effort and a lot of success in reflecting and involving the audience at the time. I felt like it was very successful in doing that. I feel like I know that we really connected in the Sunday Surgery. I know that the Sunday Surgery, not me, but I know that show saved lives. I know that dance music was accessible and safe for a whole group of young people because of Radio 1's attention to that. And I think it was the start as well of Radio 1 being truly national. And, you know, going to Leeds and going to Northern Ireland, and going to Wales, and, you know, really making an effort to stretch to stretch out and reach other parts of the country. It'd been so London centric before then, and I think that was the start of there as well. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you remember One Big? One Big Belly?
Yeah.
Do you remember One Big Belly?
What, Chris Moyles?
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun with Moyles. We had a lot of fun. one of my favorite One Big Sundays was in not in Western, where in Norfolk, Hunstanton. In Hunstanton, oh my God, the crowd was insane. That was very funny. I think that's hilarious that you remember that.
Leaving the corporation in 2005, you joined Heart for 3 years and became the first female solo show to ever take the #1 spot in the London area. Despite perhaps not having the glamour of mainstream radio, what did this mean to you personally?
Well, it was mainstream radio. It was the #1 spot. It wasn't the BBC, but I think in that figure in London, do you know what, right? It meant everything to me. And I'll tell you why. Because I had been originally I'd been put with another presenter. We don't have to say names. Greg Burns. And I've been put with another presenter, and apart from Mark Hamilton, who is my very, very dear friend and was an expert on the Sunday surgery, so it was a little different. I had never done a double header, and I certainly wasn't going to sit and laugh at somebody's jokes. That's not. Women have been sidekicks in this industry for long enough, and I'm not going. I just didn't want to do it. Anyway, we didn't get on very well, and eventually they gave me the show, and which was a big deal because it was a drive show, and there weren't many women on drive shows, so it was a big risk. And we got it to #1. We were beating Scott Mills in London. And so that #1 was including the BBC, and that had never been done before. And I think for me that was it was really important, because not just for personal satisfaction, and because I loved that slot and I loved doing that job, and it was just great. It was absolutely great. But also for other female DJs, as a matter of kind of saying, I don't need a male DJ to light my light. I have my own light, and it can be done. So it was important. It was important.
I bet Scott Mills wasn't that happy.
I think I texted him the day the figures came out and just went la 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 la. But he's way beyond me now. He's way beyond me now.
After 3 years at Heart, you moved to Ibiza. What did you get up to there? And away from the dance music scene, what's their attitude to daytime radio?
Oh, that's really interesting, because so I was really tired. And my other half was working in management and with record labels, which is what he does. And we'd always been to Ibiza. And we just had this sort of moment where we just went, let's go. So we did. And I was a mum in Ibiza, which I hadn't had very much time to do. And the kids ran around with no clothes on for 2 years and learned how to speak Spanish and French. And we had a really lovely time. But Ibiza's hard work and expensive. So yeah, we never intended to stay forever, Josh. It was only a temporary thing. But what happened there was, I did some shows on a radio station called Sonica, which still broadcasts now. And it was in a studio overlooking the San Antonio Valley with all the hills. And I kind of fell back in love with radio. So we would rock up with a box of records and just play things during the day. That's that radio station definitely reflects the island and reflects the dance music scene, but is much more chilled out. And Ibiza still has their own sort of public service radio stations. They have news radio stations. They have Spanish radio stations. This was a Spanish and international radio station, so people were broadcasting in Spanish and German and French and Dutch. And it was a real chance to kind of fall back in love with not being told what to do, and playing what you wanted to play, and speaking to some really amazing people and creative artists. And it was lovely. It was really lovely. I've got no idea how many people listened. But it was a really nice thing to do.
During the 90s, Ibiza became the centre of dance music and youth culture, with everyone from Pete Tong to Norman Cook hosting summer residencies. Looking back at this period, why do you think Ibiza was able to define this generation?
Well, Ibiza, like, I mean, I'm a sort of Ibiza geek and buff. Ibiza has always been, throughout the centuries, a place for people on the outskirts. So geographically, it was a place where traders were coming in, ships were coming in back to Spain. A lot of the time they would stop at Ibiza to have a party before the hard work arrived. It was a place where they used to send errant priests for a long time, people that had were ostracized from normal society went there. And then it's, you know, its history is incredible. It's a place that has no natural water source. The tides around Ibiza are different to the ones around Mallorca and Menorca. The water's different, the soil's different, they have no natural animals there. So this kind of mystical thing really grew. And it sort of grew and grew and grew, and that attracted hippies, and hippies attract music and parties, and it kind of sort of grew from there, really. And how that then progressed was people having these huge parties on beaches, in sunshines, in open air nightclubs, where the rules were a bit more relaxed, where the whole idea of being creative and being a dance person was allowed. You know, there were boundaries that were allowed to be pushed. And so when people like Paul Oakenfold and Danny Rampling were then sort of coming to Ibiza because they'd heard about it, and taking records from Ibiza back to London for warehouse raves, it sort of started to escalate. So between 1994 and 1998, the club scene developed there, and it was just years ahead of anything that you could find in London, where illegal parties and raves were still not being housed in clubs properly. And you know, you add to that the crystal clear blue waters and the pretty much endless sunshine, and that was sort of the birth of Balearic. And in London and in Europe at the time, so dance music was very tribal as well. So, you know, you were either a techno person or you were a house person. And in Ibiza, all of that was combined. You know, you would have all of those things under one roof, and there was a freedom and a liberty about that it was really difficult to not enjoy.
Would you say it's like a bigger Glastonbury?
Yeah, it's got that feel about it. Yeah, it has. It's got that feel about it. There's something for everyone. Yeah, there is. I always used to say that I felt like nobody gets it. Like, we went through. I must have gone through a whole year before anybody even asked me what I do for a living. Do you know? No one cares. They just don't care. And you know, and it's like you can be Madonna and nobody would blink an eyelid, because everybody is, you know, considered to be the same, and that's beautiful.
On a similar note, you became the voice of ITV's Club Reps. How do you think this documentary series epitomised the phenomenon of lad culture?
It's not a high point that I'm very proud of, actually, and I think the things like Club Reps, the series that I did wasn't focused necessarily in Ibiza, so I'm going to back out of that a bit. But I think Ibiza really suffered from programs like that. Ibiza Uncovered really suffered. And the truth of it is that where all that, you know, there were pitch battles being fought in plenty of other resorts around the world, in Greece, you know, in all sorts of different places, in Cyprus. And the truth of it is that there's probably about 4 or 5 streets in Ibiza where that sort of those kind of groups of people exist, in the West End, in San Antonio, you know, they were based on tiny groups of people in tiny hotels, and and actually those shows, Ibiza Uncovered, did untold damage to its reputation. And yeah, it took a long time to get back from that. Certainly convincing, even now convincing. I'll have parents who call me, friends going, oh, the eldest is off to Ibiza, we're a bit worried about it. And I'm like, you'll be fine, you'll be fine, you'll be absolutely fine. The island is so geared up for dealing with young people. I mean, I would much rather my kids got into trouble in Ibiza than in flipping Greece, or, you know, some of the other countries where the tolerance towards young people and behaving badly is very low. So, and that doesn't mean to say that, you know, Ibiza isn't safe. It means that they know how to deal with huge groups of people wanting to have fun.
In 2019, following covering for Angie Greaves the year before, you were unveiled as the new voice of afternoons on Magic. With an array of competitions, commercials, and a prescriptive playlist, how difficult is it to put your own stamp on the show?
So here's the thing. I think curating your own playlist is really overrated, and I've always said so. Like, because unless you are a specialist DJ, so you're a specialist in soul, or you've got a specialist dance strand, or you know, any of the hip hop DJs on One Extra and all those guys, it is really hard to find. I mean, I'm just looking at my log today. It's 3 hours, 5 times a week, and there are 12 to 14 songs in each hour. That's a lot of work to program those songs. And not only that, but to try and program songs that people either side haven't played, that people aren't going to play too much tomorrow. And so number one, it's really, really hard work doing that. And number two, it's not about my taste in music. So Magic is a brand. Do I like Magic as a brand? Yes. So I then, if I feel like I have a relationship with that brand, then in theory the music ought to follow suit. And actually, you know, I can still say things like, oh, you know, can we play this record today? And, you know, or, oh, have you heard Lamar's new record? It's amazing. Have you tried this? And so we still have those conversations. I have a really close relationship with our music team. But it's also not about my taste in music. It's about your taste in music. And if it was about my taste in music, we'd play Coldplay a lot more. And everyone hates Coldplay. So that's, you know, so I think those are the two things that it's a very common question. Choosing your own music for me is overrated. There are other people that do it much better than I can do it.
In 2020, you were selected to front the podcast Talking Cancer, created by Macmillan, where you talk to survivors and people who are undergoing treatment. In what ways does the podcast format help to create a direct intimacy which is required to talk about such delicate issues?
Well, I think, you know, the reason why I agreed to it, because I used to work at Macmillan. So when I had my sort of 2 year, I had 2 years off, and I went to work with Macmillan and then worked with Teenage Cancer Trust. And my mum died of cancer when she was 65, and she was helped by Macmillan, and they were really useful. So that's where I headed. And I think because of the Sunday surgery as well, I've always been very aware of, number one, sensationalizing stuff, and number two, not providing onward pathways, support. You can't just tell stories about sad stuff and then leave it. You have to, you know, balance that with real help. And so number one, we were talking to lots of people who were at different points in their cancer journey. And they were real people, real life experiences, which is really crucial, but not in a sensational way, about impact to families, impact to their mental health, impact to their work, their hopes for the future. And that was then balanced by the wealth of experience that Macmillan have with their experts. So whether that was their financial advisors about how to talk to your boss when, you know, you have a cancer diagnosis, what happens then, right through to making your house accessible so that, you know, if you're having problems with movement, you can be looked after well at home, right through to, you know, counselling for your mental health if you're given the really bad news. So I think that the reason why that worked so well was because of those two elements, is that, you know, 1 in 2 of us are going to get cancer. I've had cancer. And so what you don't want to do is frighten people as well, because the whole point of this is you need people to talk more and come forward. So I think they did that really well, and I was really pleased to have been asked.
Looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievement?
You know what? I think I'm going to say now, largely because as well, I'm a great believer in looking forward. And I've done some, like, I've been so lucky, and I've worked really hard. So as well, I'm also like, so Sarah Cox said to me once, will you stop saying you're grateful? Because Annie Mac had said the same thing to her. It's like, you wouldn't get a bloke saying, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm still on the radio, I'm so grateful. But we do it as women. We kind of go, I'm so grateful, thank you, thank you, thank you. And actually there's a point of it, which is like, I'm really proud of all of it, and so my proudest moment is now, and at 52 I'm still on the radio, and I'm still in a great place, doing really well. The show's amazing. I'm working with a really great bunch of people, and I'm sure you will know, Josh. So we've got a new boss who is producer Rach from the Chris Moyles team way back in the day. So producer Rachel is now our boss. And so it's a really exciting time. And I think I'm just very proud to still be on the radio and still working. I didn't think that was going to happen many times. So yeah, now.
Can you
Did you ever work with her at Radio 1?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, worked with Rachel at Radio 1. I mean, I saw her all the time because she was with Moyles and I was doing early breakfast when she was on Moyles. She used to do a lot on the road shows and the One Big Sundays, and dabbled in the Sunday surgery as well as an exec producer. So I know Rachel really well. And she's a fellow Brummie. Woohoo!
Thinking about your own radio career, what does radio mean to you?
It's one of my best friends. I think it's my best friend. I think it's my safe place. It's my happy place. It's been my life. It's given me my husband at Radio 1. It's given me the most incredible career. And it keeps me sharp and working hard and learning all the time. And you know, I get to meet people like you, and I get like connections. It's everything. It's my life.
Kind of
I'm getting emotional.
Kind of connected. Why is radio important to popular culture?
It's a mirror to popular culture, isn't it? We kind of feed off each other. It's this fantastic symbiotic relationship where you know, you and when I say radio, I think probably now in 2023 we're talking about audio, like rather than just radio. But radio is you know, it's always been a reflection and a supporter of popular culture. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And you know, in order to remain relevant, it has to keep doing that. It has to know its audience. It has to know who's listening. We have to know how people are listening. You know, and I think radio generally is doing that. It's probably been a little slow to reflect certainly younger audiences and how they're listening to music. But also, I think, you know, during the pandemic as well, radio was such a friend to people. It was such a connecting force. And and we've had, so, you know, it was when, you know, just keeping everybody happy and bringing the vibes to this really desperate situation. So I think voices are really powerful at bringing people together. And I think the way that it's presented on music radio has been, is constantly learning and improving to try and reflect youth culture.
When we from Sherry Moon she had lady who had
When we spoke to Zoe Ball, she explained that the pandemic really taught her the purpose of radio.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, absolutely, massively. That you know, that fight to just keep going, that fight to connections, bringing people together, and reflecting, really reflecting us together. We were all in it. And you know, whether that was like just trying to record a show when a bloody neighbour's trying to cut the hedge, or you know, or the dogs are barking again and the kids are going mad because they're trying to do, you know, all these different Zoom classes for school and all that kind of stuff, and everyone was in that situation, everyone. And I think for those people who were feeling really isolated, and you know, we were really lucky, I got my family and a garden, I'm not stuck in a you know, a 17th floor flat on my own, and which vast numbers of people were, and you know, to be able to make a connection there. Yes, she's right, it did display exactly what radio is for.
And finally, what's next for Emma B?
Breakfast. I've not had my breakfast yet. I am working from home today, so I'm going to record my show, and then I'm off to the theatre tonight. But you know what, right? At the moment, I am really enjoying life. I've just out the other side of a cancer diagnosis, and I'm fine and I'm fit and healthy. So I'm looking forward to a 2023 where not a lot happens, which would be really nice to have a drama-free 2023. I'm going to spend a lot more time with Harriet. Me and Harriet are going to go and get into trouble a lot more, which is really fun. And I'm going to enjoy our new boss. And yeah, I'm gonna just enjoy 2023. That's what's on the horizon.
That's a perfect way to end.
Thank you. Amazing questions. Wow.